Hi, welcome. It's Christine Weber. I'm trying to fix my hair. Okay, there we go. Um, it's my weekly live stream. Today I want to talk about yoga and alcohol. My hair does not reflect the state of the condition of alcohol in my bloodstream, by the way. Uh, and I'm making fun of the topic, but actually it's a serious topic. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up today was because there's been a trend that I've seen in the industry towards bringing more alcohol into yoga workshops and classes. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. So usually I wait a minute or two to kind of get rolling because the Facebook algorithm takes a little while to kick in. It tells people that I'm on, and it takes a minute for people to get here after you get the notification. So I don't expect everybody to put this on their calendar, but Facebook will give you the notification. The other thing I want to say is that all my live streams stay up on my Subtle Yoga with Kristine Weber page, so you can always watch. You can go back and watch other ones. I try to keep them down 10, 15 minutes, not too long. And they're every Thursday at this time. I know some people are watching from other parts of the world and have to get up early or to be here live. You don't have to do that if you want to watch the replay. The other thing, let's see, I got a few things coming up that I wanted to share. One is for those of you who happen to be in the Asheville, Charlotte area, I'm having a free workshop on Saturday. It's called something about accessing the great tools of yoga classes. And so you're welcome to join me, but you do have to register. And it is at Breathe Yoga and Wellness in Morganton. And if you need a link for that, if you can't find the link, it's on my page under events, but I'm on my website under events. But if you can't find it, just feel free to leave a message. I'll put it in the comments here. Okay, so let's see. Anything else I wanted to share? Oh, the RYT 200 starts March 27th. The RYT 500, which is a 300-hour advanced program, starts May 1st. Registration is open for those. We'd love you to join us. Okay, so the topic is about yoga and alcohol, yoga and substances. That's what I wanted to talk about a little bit today because it's a trend for sure. Yeah. And believe me, I get it. It's difficult to make a yoga studio work, and often having an event with some wine, with some beer, usually it seems to be one way that people offer a sense of community and sort of relaxing. And so I totally understand the rationale for doing it. So I'm not just here to say like, don't do it, but I do think we should think it through a little bit. And first of all, one of the first times I saw a yoga and wine workshop, I asked the person who was doing it, and I said, that's not in the yoga tradition, just so and the guy said, oh, no, the yogis never said not to drink wine. In fact, in Tantra, they say you should drink wine. And I was like, So that struck me as maybe not a complete understanding of the tradition, So I am well aware of the 5 M's of Tantra, which are translated on the left-handed, is this my left hand? Left-handed side of Tantra as, let's see if I can remember them all. Wine, which is, wine, I think it's madhya, wine, and then meat, which is the same word as tongue in Sanskrit. And then wine, meat, there's a couple more, let me see. Oh, fish, matsya. And then toasted grain, which is mudra. And then the last of the 5 M's is matuna, which means sexual intercourse. So you have these 5 ends of Tantra that have been out there for a long time: this meat, fish, alcohol, meat, wine, toasted grain, alcohol, and sex. And what the heck does that mean? So it was interpreted through left-handed practitioners that you experiment with these substances in very highly ritualized ways, by the way, in order to shift consciousness, change consciousness, and reach some kind of expanded state. So he wasn't entirely wrong when he said, oh, the yogis used wine in their practices. I was like, okay, we'll check that out. Now, an interesting thing about Tantra, by the way, is that it was highly eschewed by sort of normal people um, whatever that means, like society. It was kind of eschewed by society for many centuries. It was considered really strange, weird practices. So that's one aspect. And even today, the idea of Tantra is sort of associated with some salacious practices in some parts of India, right? So because Tantra, let's be clear, Tantra is a incredibly diverse, expansive field of study. And there were tantric practitioners that were like experimenting with substances and weird behaviors and stuff in order to see how that changed their consciousness. So that was part of the tradition, there's no doubt. But it's not the only part of the tradition. And there is also sort of the right-handed part of Tantra that took those 5 M's and they translated them sublimely. So the idea of wine, for example, was drink the nectar that comes from the pineal gland, the amrita or the rasa, sometimes it was called. Drink that nectar in deep meditation, achieve states of intoxication with the divine, right? So it's more like a metaphorical understanding of that Sanskrit madhya. And then the next one, which means meat, the more sublime understanding was not eat meat, but eat your tongue, hold your tongue, don't talk. Talking creates creates some scars every time we talk, and we talk too much and we say too many things. Be quiet, go within, right? And then the idea of toasted grain, very interesting. It was like toast your company, find satsang, toast the people that you're with, discern, in other words, the people that you spend time with, and spend time with those who are, that support your spiritual elevation. That's an interesting one for toasted grain. Then what was the other one? Fish. Oh, fish is interesting. So fish, the subtle or the esoteric translation of fish is this crisscrossing of the Ida and the Pingala as they go up through the chakra system. So eat the fish means focus on or consume the Ida and the Pingala, so they come together into Sushumna and you achieve enlightenment. So that was the esoteric idea of fish. And then sexual intercourse, of course, that one's the easiest one. The coming together of Shiva and Shakti, the coming together of the opposites, the coming together of the individual and the cosmic consciousness. All of that union kind of symbol is symbolized through sexual intercourse in a sort of a crude way. So 5 M's can be exoteric, 5 M's can be esoteric. When the guy who said to me, well, the yogis said to drink wine, he was kind of talking about the more cruder understanding, or the left-handed side of Tantra understanding. And I'm not suggesting that there's anything particularly wrong about that, but it would typically happen in some sort of a measured, controlled, and ritualized environment. Okay, so then the next question really comes to where we are right now. There's lots of yoga and wine that's offered out there. And as a person who has studied a lot about and worked with many, many people with addiction challenges, that's where I have my issue with it. Because, okay, so I moved to Asheville in 2001. At that time, there were crystal stores everywhere and like new age meetups happening. And, there was all this sort of, there was a lot of opportunity for kind of spiritual activities. And what happened to Asheville is that it slowly transformed into Beer City, USA, and became a huge tourist destination for people to come and consume alcohol, which felt kind of sad to me. And at the same time, there was a proliferation in Asheville of recovery industry. So there's many people here who do recovery work, and so people can come here, drink a lot, get addicted, go into recovery. But when you come out of recovery, if you're in Asheville and you come out of recovery, you're just assaulted by alcohol. And that is not exclusive to Asheville. I would suggest that is very common in the United States, in the Western world in general, in Europe, in Australia. Yeah, I mean, in Japan, there is just ample access to alcohol all over the place. And what the research shows definitively is that 1 out of 10 people, and a little more than 1 out of 10 people, are going to become addicted to that substance. So when we offer, when there are very few places for people who have addiction challenges to go and have satsang and community and feel safe and feel like they're in a dry environment, I think that yoga studios can offer that refuge for people. And I totally get it if you don't agree with me. I'm actually totally fine with it if you don't agree with me, because I'm not a studio owner, and I have watched so many studio owners struggle to make it, and I've watched so many studios fold. And one way they make it is they have these kind of parties, and people like to come and have a good time. So I totally get it if you don't agree with me. And at the same time, wouldn't it be really lovely if yoga could be a place of refuge, a place where people could go? And so, maybe not every studio in town needs to be dry, but I think having some dry spaces that offer yoga, particularly because yoga is so healing for addiction. So having some dry spaces that offer yoga, I think it can be really helpful. Thank you, by the way, for everybody who's here, for just saying that hi. And I love it when you say hi. Please say hi. And if you have any questions or comments about this topic, I would certainly appreciate it. One other thing I wanted to add. So I talked about the tradition a little bit, and I talked about the issue of addiction and having dry spaces. Oh, I wanted to add one other thing, which was about the 420 yoga. That's another really popular thing right now. Get high and smoke the weed and do yoga. So whether it's marijuana, whether it's alcohol, whatever the substance is, let's talk about what the purpose of yoga is, right? So according to the perennial tradition, so I'm not suggesting that there aren't many reasons to do yoga. I think there's many reasons to do yoga, but according to the perennial tradition, the ultimate goal of yoga is this expansion of consciousness, right? This sort of capacity to wake up a little bit more, kind of understand yourself a little bit better. And that is challenging to do with substances in your system. I don't think that's such a radical statement, is it? The substances in your system, sometimes they may give you a little insight, but if they're used habitually, if they're used perpetually, what they do is start to supplant the deeper practices that are really meant to get you there. And they, of course, have many, many health challenges too. We don't have a lot of data on marijuana yet. I just saw an article that came out from, I can't remember, it was NIH or one of the big medical groups that said we're still not sure about. There's more than 100 cannabinoid substances in marijuana, so they don't really know how it affects things. They don't really understand how it affects heart disease, for example, or if it has a similar effect as tobacco on the lungs. Like smoking things isn't great for you, in general. But we do know that alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs out there, and it is the most dangerous drug to detox from, by the way. It's the one drug that will kill you when you detox from it. So it's serious stuff. When you're talking about addiction, I'm very, very highly cognizant that there's a difference between use and abuse, right? So a little bit of use of alcohol, if you're having it in a relaxing way, a couple times a week or whatever, for most people, it's not a big problem. But 1 out of 10 people, as I said, will become addicted. And I just don't know that we want to create a space where that is triggering for people, and people don't want to come because they're in recovery. They don't want to be in the space anymore, right? So I think that's something we need to consider. And then considering this idea of the goal of yoga, waking up, and substances, kind of have the opposite effect. The tradition talks about the 3 gunas, and they talk about this in Ayurveda, right? And that the gunas are qualities that present in everything that's manifest, that Prakriti manifests, right? So you have the tamoguna, that quality of sluggishness, the rajaguna, the quality of dynamism, activity, and then the sattvaguna, which is the quality of sentience and awareness. And in most of the texts, what you see, particularly Yoga Sutras, but many of the other texts too, what you see is the yogis recommending that you spend time in sattvaguna. That sattvaguna is the pathway to that awareness, to that consciousness and that openness. And the Ayurveda people classified everything that you can put into your body under those 3 categories. And so rajasic things are things like coffee and caffeine and chocolate, and tamasic things are things that bring you down, and that includes alcohol and all drugs. They fall into that category in Ayurveda. So again, there's another reason. If we want to stay sattvic, we stick with the light foods that promote consciousness. So I hope that this has been helpful. I'm going to see if there are some questions and thoughts here. So Stephanie said, I agree with you. I own a studio. I felt the pressure to have yoga and wine or yoga and beer. I never saw how that worked with waking up to more presence in your practice. Yeah, I think it's something we have to at least consider. And like I said, I would never tell people don't ever do it. Like, I understand why some people feel the need to, but I think it's important to consider the tradition, you know. And then Julie says, a thought question: how can we honor our bodies while puffing toxins at the same time? It seems a contradiction to me, or am I missing something? Yeah, that's a good point, Julie. And Vicky said, I agree. The struggle is real for studio owners. Yeah, I think it's really hard for studio owners because there's some pressure to have these events, and at the same time to, you know, make your space welcoming, to bring more people in. I mean, you really can't make it as a yoga studio unless you have 100 people walking through that door every day. Well, it depends on your overhead, of course, but that's kind of the basics, you know. How are you going to get 100 people through the door? Well, you have an event like wine and yoga or beer and yoga, and you're going to get a bunch of people in for sure, you know. And there is something to be said for that argument, which I've heard made many times, that this is a way that we get people in the door so they can let go of their habits. And, you know, that's a great argument. I'm not suggesting that's not a good argument. But I think there's a way to do these things that are respectful of the tradition, and, you know, and we have to make those decisions for ourselves, right? So I like to just kind of lay out the information. Oh, I want to say one more thing before I go, which is that I had a conversation with Dr. Shaman Hatley, who's a really good friend of mine. He's one of the top Sanskritists in the world. And he teaches at the University of Massachusetts. And so I was chatting with him about this topic, and I said, well, you know, some people say, like I was talking about this yoga teacher guy, like some people say that there's nowhere in the text that says don't drink alcohol. And he kind of smiled knowingly and said, I mean, he's just a genius. He smiled knowingly and he said, well, that's because it's just assumed. He said it was so obvious in the ancient world, even in the contemporary world, that yoga and substances have nothing to do with each other. You know, there's no substances involved in yoga, that in some of the texts, they didn't even feel the need to mention it. So I thought that was interesting. So, you know, we live in a different culture, a different time. How can we make yoga, you know, inclusive and bring more people in and still make the business work? These are challenging questions. I hope I've given you some things to think about today. There's a couple more comments here. So I appreciate how much you grow and expand my awareness. Thank you, Kathy. Thanks for being here. And then Mueller wrote, this is a huge recovery community, and if yoga is supposed to be a healing practice, is the idea to really encourage alcohol and yoga related events. Yeah, that's why I'm talking about this. I think we have to think deeply about these things. Jing wrote and said, not so much on the intoxicants, but I'm intrigued by the number you offer, 100 people per day needed to make a studio a go. It might be an interesting topic for a future live. The economics of teaching yoga. Yeah, I mean, so just do the numbers. Like where I live in Asheville, to rent a space that's big enough for a yoga studio, you're going to be paying, you know, somewhere in the range of $1,500 to $2,000 a month, at least, maybe more. You know, then you're paying your teachers, and if you don't have 100 people a day coming through the doors, you're not going to last very long. So that's just the basics of the economics, but that's something I'm happy to talk about in future live streams. So thank you for being here today. It's really nice to see everybody. If you're watching this as a replay, please leave a question or a comment, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.